South Korea and the U.S. appear to be increasingly stressing the importance of their strong military alliance. This despite their ups and downs over the termination of the Seoul-Tokyo GSOMIA on top of the contentious military issues that lie ahead of them. North Korea and China, meanwhile, have recently reaffirmed their friendship, and now much attention is being drawn to whether Kim Jong-un will visit China next month to mark the 70th anniversary of the founding of China. Today, we go in-depth on the current status of the South Korea-U.S. alliance and regional affairs surrounding the two Koreas with Dr. Jeong-hun, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, my pleasure.
In contrast to its previous claims of disappointment over South Korea's decision to terminate GSOMIA, the U.S. appears to be putting its focus back on the strong South Korea-U.S. alliance. First of all, U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Robert Abrams attended the Seoul Defense Dialogue, becoming the first USFK commander to do so. And also, U.S. Ambassador Harry Harris stressed that South Korea-U.S. alliance is the foundation for peace and prosperity on the peninsula and throughout the region. How do you see Washington's current stance?
Well, the postures and the comments by the U.S. that the high-ranking officials clearly show that still the ROK-U.S. alliance is very important, even for the national interests of the United States. Although the U.S., as you mentioned, expressed some disappointment after South Korean government decision to the withdrawal from the GSOMIA with Tokyo, but the South Korean government made it clear that that decision has nothing to do with the strong alliance with the United States. But, you know, although we got the strong alliance with the United States, but the two countries could have a little bit different opinions for each case, like the GSOMIA decision. And specifically, as you know, U.S. got the strong intention or the opinion that South Korean governments would continue to renew continue to have the GSOMIA agreement with Japan. But in terms of the economic disputes between South Korea and Japan, and the unreasonable arguments by Japanese government, South Korean government was inevitable to make such a decision on GSOMIA. So, and then the South Korean government and repeatedly expressed each intention that South Korean governments want to continue to maintain the strong alliance with the United States, and has nothing to do with the GSOMIA in terms of the maintaining the strong alliance between South Korea and the U.S. So it shows that although the two countries, South Korea and the United States, could have a little bit deeper opinions for each case in terms of the little bit different the national interest, respectively, but still both countries want to maintain strong alliance for their own interest. So after expressing some disappointment in the U.S. government, the justice came back to the normal stance about maintaining strong alliance with the South Korea. It clearly shows that the South Korea is still important for the U.S. leadership or the U.S. national interest in the region.
So although South Korea and the U.S. can't agree on every issue, their alliance remains strong. Now, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yis made a visit to North Korea this week, where he held talks with top North Korean diplomats. And during his stay, he emphasized close China-North Korea ties and also emphasized their common interests. How do you think Washington was observing his visit?
Well, we started the peace process with the Trump administration, Moon Jae-in administration, Kim Jong-un, the chairman Kim Jong-un, and President Xi since last year, 2018, and we got the similar situations last year too. And the Kim Jong-un got the meetings with President Xi 4 times, and as you know, the President Xi visited North Korea this year. So the U.S. They're a little bit familiar with the China's movement or the posture about North Korea in this peace process. So I don't think that the current the foreign minister's visit, China's the foreign minister's visit to North Korea, could change or could affect significantly on the U.S. the posture or the opinions on China or the North Korea-China relations. But the U.S. also expect that China would function important role in terms of the encouraging or pushing North Korea to come back to the talks with the United States. And meanwhile, the North Korea need to have some kind of the support from China that if North Korea fails to get something good, when it come back to the talks with the U.S., you need to have something that it can rely on, like China's promise that it would continue to support at the limited level in terms of the international sanctions and other things, but still China would support the North Korea in terms of its survival.
Now, the South Korean government, after holding a National Security Council meeting, said that it'll push for an early return of the remaining U.S. military bases in Korea. It cited the difficulties that local communities are facing. But why do you think our government is pushing for an early return of those bases?
Well, I don't think that that decision was kind of early decision. I don't think so. It's pretty long-standing the negotiations between the two countries. But in terms of some kind of the partitions and the difficulties that local communities and the local people got, South Korean government could not delay that matter any longer. But as you mentioned, the timing was a little bit sensitive and subtle. So some people suspect that South Korean government made such an early decision to push the United States to show some South Koreans strong opinions against the United States. But I don't think so, because there's nothing that South Korean government could get from the United States by pushing it. Because, as I mentioned earlier today, South Korean government still needed to maintain strong alliance with the U.S. for its survival and security matters. So, by pushing U.S. on that matter, there's nothing the South Korean government could get. But some people say that the South Korean government pushed the United States on that matter because of the upcoming burden sharing negotiations with the United States, but it's not clear. And South Korean government try to show its intention, sincere intention, that still its alliance with the United States is very important and very important for the South Korean government and the current administration. So there's no reason that South Korean governments kind of make the United States government irritated or a little bit get angry. So I don't think that the South Korean government made that kind of decision because of some kind of political decision or diplomatic decisions. It's a little bit unclear. So I think that South Korean government had to make that kind of decision, although it recognized that decision or the announcement could bring up some kind of the controversies, like you mentioned, but that matter should be resolved as soon as possible. So South Korean governments had to announce that kind of decision at this time of the period of time.
So it was a long-standing issue, and you're skeptical that the Korean government is pushing for an early return to gain leverage over the U.S.
Yes.
Now, another pending military issue between Seoul and Washington is a defense cost-sharing negotiations, and the 11th round of defense cost-sharing talks will officially begin this month. How do you expect negotiations to play out?
It will be tough. I remember that every burden sharing negotiation was very tough and difficult before they made the deal, because it came up with the kind of because of cost and the tax revenue for each country's people. So it will be very difficult. in terms of the domestic, the political issue, the considerations, and the kind of the two countries, the relations, because in terms of the negotiation this time, that decision would affect the next round of the burden sharing negotiations. So in every time the two countries got that kind of the negotiation, the process was always tough. So, and as you know, currently the President Trump of the United States got the strong opinions that U.S., the South Korean government and the South Korea should increase its burden sharing. But for the South Korean governments and the South Korean people think that South Korea already got the highest level of the burden sharing compared to the other U.S. allies in the world. So it would not be acceptable if the South Korean governments would make agreements like the abruptly increasing the burden sharing, considering President Trump's opinions or something like that. So I think that the TF or the negotiating teams would go through the very tough process before they reach the final deal. So I expect that this round would see the kind of the final deal toward the very end of this year, probably, or the early next year.
So very tough talks are expected ahead. Now, another hot-button military issue between Seoul and Washington is the transfer of wartime operational control. And the two sides are reportedly at odds over the commanding authority over South Korean military after the OPCON transfer. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that the two sides have shown the different opinions frequently. I don't think so. But they are still in the initial stage of going through that kind of the translation. So transition. So it would be inevitable that they would go through the kind of trial and error the process, and they are going through that kind of thing. And as you know, the joint military exercise this year, which was probably several weeks ago, they just tested how South Korean military would function, would be able to lead their joint military command in the wartime after the receiving the wartime operational control from the United States. Still, we are going through the first stage. It's like an initial operational capability test. And then after this year's the military joint exercise, probably later this year, they will evaluate. They will evaluate the South Korean military's capabilities about that aspect. And then next year, we'll go through the second stage, and 2 years later, we'll go through the third stage. So we are still in the initial stage. And in terms of that future, it's still the ambiguous and the confusing about which point and when the South Korean commander would take the control, and when the U.S. vice commander just transfer the authority to the South Korean commander, and what procedures and process, everything is new. So the two sides are going through that kind of the trial error period, and after that kind of the experiment or the process, they will get the better situations. And toward the end of there's the period or the stages, and they will get the normal there's a stage or the situations. So I think that they have the different opinions about who takes the authority or the commander, vice commander, or something like that. They already know who got the commander position and the vice commander position in terms of agreements, and that they are just going through that kind of period, and the time will resolve that kind of the confusing stages.
And one last question for you. The UN General Assembly is coming up, and North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho reportedly will not attend the UN General Assembly. And the North has also told the UN to cut international aid staff in Pyongyang. Possible motives behind these moves?
The first, I'm so sorry to hear that kind of the North Korea's decisions, because there are so many North Korean people who are suffering from the different situations, like the short of the food and other things. But I think that the North Korean government made that kind of decision in terms of its political considerations. As you know, North Korea and the U.S. tried to resume their talks sooner or later. And before going to the new round of their talks, each side tried to put try to increase their leverage against each other. So, and I think that the North Korea's decision like that is kind of the attempt to increase its leverage before the resuming talks with the United States. So political decisions. But the North Korean government and the Chairman Kim must remember must think that still its people are suffering from such kind of political decisions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Min, for your insights.
Right, thank you.
And that wraps up our show. Thank you, as always, for being with us.